Chapter 61. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 61. Hidden Worries. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Why did she have to go back to her room to rest? What exactly happened that she was not allowed to say in front of her? What important secrets did they have that she was not allowed to know? Liang Yunqing did not mind. She knew very well that she was not someone that Yin Qianqian could trust. However, Yan Hua's anxious look seemed to indicate that something had happened to Yin Qianqian. Liang Yunqing was only worried about him, that was all. She did not leave immediately. Instead, she turned to look at Hao Qing. Hao Qing still smiled and nodded at her. Liang Yunqing did not insist. She got up and carried him back to her room. After that, everything went as usual. It was not the first time that Yin Qianqian was not home when he was busy, but Liang Yunqing vaguely felt that something was not right. Until the day before Liang Yunqing was about to leave the country, Yin Qianqian did not ask again, "What is he busy with?" For the first time, Liang Yunqing could not hold back her feelings. She asked Hao Qing about Yin Qianqian's whereabouts. Hao Qing pursed his lips and still had a formulaic expression on his face. "Of course, it's what you should be busy with." His words rendered Liang Yunqing speechless. There were indeed many things that Yin Qianqian needed to pay attention to. Of course, she could not be ranked first. The next day, Liang Yunqing was about to embark on a trip abroad, but she seemed to have a lot on her mind. "Miss Yunqing, it's time for you to board the plane." It seemed that she really could not wait for Yin Qianqian. Liang Yunqing was just sitting in the waiting hall of the airport and had no intention of boarding the plane. She was not a spoiled young lady who insisted that Yin Qianqian send her to the plane. After that day, Liang Yunqing thought about it and felt that something was wrong. She had never seen Yan Hua's expression. Yin Qianqian's absence for a few days made her more and more worried. She did not know what had happened to him. This time, Liang Yunqing did not want to hide her feelings. "Miss Yunqing is really boarding the plane." Hao Qing repeated it again. He guessed Liang Yunqing's worries over the past few days and continued, "Please rest assured. I'm sure you know what kind of person Sir is. After spending so much time with him, nothing bad will happen to him. I promise you." Liang Yunqing glanced at the little diamond watch on her wrist. She knew that she would miss the plane if she did not leave now. If Yin Qianqian was really fine, she would let him say that he was fine, or she could not stop her from coming to his side. She could not say such words and do such things willfully. Suddenly, the feeling of not wanting to leave emerged from her chest again. She had been badly hurt by this place since the beginning. Would she change just because of one Yin Qianqian? Clenching her fists, Liang Yunqing tried hard to smile and nod at Hao Qing. "I understand." How could she have almost forgotten the truth that Yin Qianqian had taught her? If she allowed her children to fall in love, she would not be able to achieve great things. Sitting on the plane, Liang Yunqing slowly closed her eyes. As she closed her eyes, all the things that had happened before flashed through her mind. The first time they met in the rain, the cup of warm cocoa. She had a fever and no one noticed it. Only Yin Qianqian carried her to the doctor. He taught her how to dance and clumsily stepped on many of his feet. Noël Deren they went to a noodle shop to eat noodles, cooked together in country D, and went shopping together. Anne. Liang Yunqing suddenly woke up. After a moment of confusion, she became clear-headed. She seemed to understand why she was in such an unexpected mood, but she did not want to understand it. She kept the immature thoughts of her youth deep in her heart. The plane is about to land. Chapter 62. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 62. That Aggressive Gaze. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Liang Yunqing stood in front of the window and looked at the clear sky outside. She was a little lost in thought. About half a year ago, she and Yin Qianqian had stayed here for more than 10 days. Those days were harmonious and warm. It was hard to imagine that the person with her was the man known as young Master Evil. Evil perhaps so, but Liang Yunqing knew that he was not a completely cold-blooded and heartless person. Thinking about it carefully, she could not find any evidence to say so. She just had this strong feeling. At that time, Yin Qianqian also liked to stand in front of this window and look at the scenery outside through the glass. It was unknown what he was thinking about. Liang Yunqing once wondered if there would be a day when she would stand in front of this window and look at the scenery that he had once seen, she would understand his thoughts. Now that she was standing here, she still did not understand. She still did not understand what that person was thinking. It took Liang Yunqing more than 2 months to finally adapt to the life in country D. She lived alone in this huge house. Initially, she did not think that it was only when she was alone that she felt that this house was so big and empty. Other than Hao Cheng's concerned phone call, she had almost no other contact with the country. She had tried to muster up her courage. On the other hand, Liang Yunqing's studies in country D were also very tight. She needed to learn what other people learned in 4 years in a year. This was 4 times the amount. Although Liang Yunqing's learning ability was not bad, if she wanted to reach this level, it was hard to achieve without hard work. After all, there were no true prodigies in this world. Every Wednesday afternoon was the only time she could relax herself. It was also the time when she rarely acted willfully. Without Yin Qianqian's consent, Liang Yunqing took the initiative to choose oil painting. She did not have any foundation and needed to learn from scratch bit by bit. Yin Qianqian had always let her choose her own path. Therefore, Liang Yunqing thought that even if she did not tell him, it would not matter. Carrying the drawing board, it was time to go to the studio. When she arrived at the studio, she saw the human model Liang Yunqing who was preparing. She only realized that she was going to practice the human body today. At first, she was very shy when she met a nude model, but the students in the studio were already used to it. This needed to be seen through an artistic point of view. If she was too shallow and shy, it would appear that her intentions were not pure. After she gradually got used to it, she could easily deal with such things. Liang Yunqing put on the apron she used to draw and began to seriously color. Adjust. She had just applied a few strokes on the canvas when she could not help but stop her wrist. A gaze fell on her. This was not a strange premonition, but a gaze that could really be felt. It was very aggressive, very domineering, so strong that it could not be ignored. Liang Yunqing turned around and caught sight of the unusual figure by the door of the studio. She stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. She could only hear her heart beating in her chest, making a loud thump, thump, thump. The man was tall against the light. Even in this place full of Europeans, he did not lose out in the slightest. His temperament was outstanding, and his entire body exuded the aura of a king. It was eye-catching, but he did not dare to look at it. Liang Yunqing's hand that was holding the paintbrush trembled subconsciously. The paintbrush fell to the ground, and she hurriedly bent down to pick it up. The spotless, matte black leather shoes appeared in front of her. Chapter 63. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 63. Look at the naked body of a man. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Liang Yunqing took a deep breath and cursed herself for being useless. What was there to be excited about? Calm down. They had not seen each other for a long time. In addition, they had been separated for quite a few days before they left. It had been several months since they last saw each other. It was not a short period of time. It was not like there had never been such a time in the past where they had not seen each other for a few months. However, the feeling this time was completely different, especially before Liang Yunqing left. Yan Hua's inexplicable actions had always been on her mind. Now that she saw Yin Qianqian standing in front of her unscathed, she could not help but let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, there was an inexplicable feeling of sourness in her heart. She still did not delve into it. Why are you here? Liang Yunsheng said this sentence. Her voice was inexplicably raised, appearing a little abrupt. It was as if she was anxious, but also excited. It was probably because she did not expect to make such an urgent voice. When she reacted, Liang Yunsheng was more or less embarrassed. "You're here. Why didn't you call first?" Yin Qianqian didn't say anything. He gently clenched his fist in front of his lips and coughed. Liang Yunsheng just realized that Yin Qianqian didn't change much, but he seemed to have lost weight. His face also became a little pale. Although his temperament was still the same, he looked a little sickly. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Liang Yunsheng's surprise turned into worry. "Let's talk about it when we get back." Yin Qianqian didn't answer Liang Yunsheng's question. He just grabbed her wrist and turned to leave. "Hey! I haven't packed my things yet." Liang Yunsheng was still wearing an apron that covered her body with paint. The two of them spoke in Chinese the entire time. None of the people around them could understand what they were saying. They could only see Liang Yunsheng's shock as she pulled at them. It seemed that she was not very friendly. A tall man with blonde hair and blue eyes walked up to them and asked Liang Yunsheng, "Do you need help?" "Move aside," Yin Qianqian said in German in a deep voice. It was an imperative sentence. It was more appropriate to call it an order than a discussion. "Senior, I'm really sorry. He's a friend of mine. We have some matters to settle. If it's possible, please help me clean up." Before Liang Yunsheng could finish, Yin Qianqian pulled her out of the studio. Yin Qianqian's mood was very strange. Compared to how happy she felt when she saw him, he seemed to be angry. Liang Yunsheng hesitated, but she still could not take the initiative to ask what was wrong with Yin Qianqian. He threw her into the car and drove straight home. "Are you surprised to see me?" Yin Qianqian closed the door and turned around to look at Liang Yunsheng with a fierce aura. Liang Yunsheng stood beside him carefully. Perhaps it was because they had not seen each other for some time, but there was a subtle sense of strangeness between the two of them. Actually, you can think of it as a surprise. It's more appropriate. Liang Yunsheng thought about her words. It was true. She was happy to see him looking for her. Yes, very, very happy. Yin Qianqian sat on the sofa. Perhaps it was because of Liang Yunsheng's words, the aura around him was no longer frightening, but it was still clear that he was unhappy. Yin Qianqian coughed heavily again. After calming his breathing, he looked at Liang Yunsheng with a hoarse voice. "I sent you to Country D to let you learn these useless things. To see a man naked. Chapter 64. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 64. Almost dying just like that. Author. Bitter days. Machine translation. Liang Yunsheng was stunned by Yin Qianqian's words. Her eyes widened in surprise. She had never expected that the main point of his anger was actually this. "This is art." Liang Yunsheng thought for a moment and said, "Just like how you taught me to dance before, this is all art. I don't know what art is or isn't art. I only know what is useful and what is useless. Teaching you to dance is a necessary means of communication. Oil painting. Tell me, what is the use?" Yin Qianqian asked indifferently. How could he be such a shallow person? "You've never cared about my things." Liang Yunsheng could not help but be a little angry at being told that she liked things. "You're right, I just care too little about you." Yin Qianqian held his chest and coughed a few more times. "Did you really learn to paint just to like it? Are you too slow, or are you pretending not to know and enjoying this feeling? Did you really understand the way the man who stopped us today looked at you? You don't know anything. I want to learn to draw also because." Yin Qianqian showed a rare impatience. "You don't have to tell me what you think." With that, Yin Qianqian stood up, opened the door and walked out. "Where are you going?" Liang Yunsheng followed by the door, but she did not follow him out. He was leaving just like that. What did he mean? He came here just to have a big fight with her. The loud sound of the door closing made Liang Yunsheng come back to her senses. Only then did she notice that the phone on the table suddenly vibrated. Liang Yunsheng picked up the phone and glanced at it. She found that it was an unfamiliar number from China. After thinking for a while, she clicked it open. "Is the boss on your side?" The voice was somewhat familiar, but Liang Yunsheng could not remember who the owner of the voice was. "I'm Ling Ruofei." The person on the other side obviously guessed the meaning of her pause. He repeated it helplessly and anxiously, "Is Yin Qianqian on your side?" "Ah. Oh, yes, he was just here, but..." Liang Yunqing stuttered. She was too embarrassed to say that the two of them had a childish quarrel over a small matter. "He ran away from home to see you in country D. I really can't do anything about him. Ling Ruofei was clearly going crazy over there." "Ha. Ran away from home." Why did Ling Ruofei's tone sound a little strange? Where did Yin Qianqian want to go? Was he considered to have run away from home? "Yin Qianqian is injured, don't you know? Hao Qing didn't tell you." Did I accidentally become a big mouth?" Ling Ruofei said exaggeratedly. "What's going on? Since you've spilled the beans, why don't you just tell me everything?" When she heard that Yin Qianqian was injured, Liang Yunqing's heart felt an inexplicable pain. As expected, Yan Hua's abnormal behavior was really an accident. Actually, it happened a few months ago. I don't know the exact details of how he was injured. When I received the news, I already saw the injured him. Although he had also recuperated for a while, Yin Qianqian's injury this time was more serious. Apart from being shot in the shoulder and lower abdomen, the worst part was that he was hit in the lungs by a stray bullet. Fortunately, he was treated in time, or else he might have died. His injury will take at least another 2 to 3 months to fully recover. Half a year is the minimum target that I set for him. Who knew that he was finally good enough to get out of bed, so he secretly ran away and disappeared? How would we dare to investigate him? Hao Qing is familiar with his personality, so I guessed that he might have gone to your place." Liang Yunqing listened to Ling Ruofei's words in a daze. Before she could give him any answer, her first reaction was to quickly open the door and chase after that person. Yin Qianqian, you lunatic. Chapter 65. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 65. He was jealous. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Yes, Yin Qianqian was a lunatic. Why did he drag his body to see her when he was sick? The point was, he was still angry at such a childish thing. Could it be that he was really sick and had run away from home with her? Liang Yunqing did not even have time to change her clothes. She put on her shoes and rushed out. He's gone. On the other end of the phone, Ling Ruofei was obviously worried that something would happen to a patient and a little girl, so he did not hang up the phone. Liang Yunqing did not dare to run far and only walked around the house. She was afraid that if Yin Qianqian did not leave, he would not be able to enter the house. We argued for a while, and then Liang Yunqing said to the other end of the phone. "Speaking of which, you two have not seen each other for so long. You should be intimate and sweet. What happened between you two? What important thing made you quarrel?" Ling Ruofei asked curiously. While running around on the road, looking for Yin Qianqian, Liang Yunqing briefly told him about what happened today. "You guys are really..." Ling Ruofei was on the other end of the phone, laughing so hard that he almost cried. Even he could not help but be speechless. "But I think you still don't understand why Yin Qianqian is angry with you." Ling Ruofei decided to be Liang Yunqing's confidant. Isn't it because I took the initiative to learn how to draw?" After grasping the main point, Liang Yunqing slowed down and decided to listen to Ling Ruofei carefully. I promise you 100% that this reason is only a very, very small part. The most important thing is, he is jealous. Ah. Jealous, of what? Liang Yunqing blinked her big, sparkling eyes in confusion. Think about it. He left us from thousands of miles away and went to country D to visit you with his injuries. What happened in the end? Not only did you not study as hard as he had expected, you didn't even paint freely there. And what kind of painting was it? A man's naked body. He wants to take you away. Fine, there's even a senior who wants to snatch you away from him. This is really you. If someone else dared to provoke you like this, I don't know how they would have been strangled to death. Liang Yunqing was silent for a moment. Thinking about it, it seemed that what Ling Ruofei said was indeed true. Let me tell you, men are sometimes very stingy, especially Yin Qianqian, who looks cold on the surface, but is actually very petty. Oh. Liang Yunqing had been chatting with Ling Ruofei, so she accidentally bumped into someone. I'm really sorry. You bumped into me. It was a bear man with a beer belly. His skin was rough and his flesh was thick. Liang Yunqing could barely touch him with a light touch, but he cared so much. It was obvious that he was looking for trouble. Liang Yunqing was also stunned when she was grabbed by her collar. The phone in her hand was snatched away. Yunqing. Yunqing. Ling Ruofei also heard that something was wrong on the other end of the phone. Z Nation. The bear man fiddled with Liang Yunqing's phone in his hand. The people from Z Nation who come to study abroad are all very rich. Yes, they are Z Nation people. A voice came from the other end. His slender fingers pinched the bear man's wrist with surprising force. The bear man growled in pain and let go of Liang Yunqing's collar. The mobile phone that was already in his hands was snatched away. Yin Qianqian. Liang Yunqing was pleasantly surprised and flustered. She rushed to his side, found him, and stood beside him. She felt more secure than ever. Why did you come out? Yin Qianqian placed the thing in his hand in Liang Yunqing's arms. Go back. You want to leave just like that? He thought that someone wanted to be a hero, but upon closer inspection, the bear man realized that it was a tall, thin Asian man with yellow skin and black hair. What was there to be afraid of? Perhaps he could even give him more money for his drinks. Yin Qianqian covered his lips and coughed twice. He opened the SIM card slot and took out the SIM card. He threw the phone into the trash bin at the side as if he was teaching Liang Yunqing, you can't take things that are dirted. Chapter 66. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 66. Take off your clothes. Author. Bitter days. Machine translation. Yin Qianqian's words seemed to be directed at Liang Yunqing, but in fact, he was mocking the muscular man. Because he was speaking in German, if he really wanted to communicate with Liang Yunqing, Yin Qianqian would definitely use Chinese. Liang Yunqing naturally understood what he meant, but she was still faintly worried. After all, this was a foreign country, and Yin Qianqian was injured. That man was definitely not a good person. He looked strong and strong. If there was really a conflict, he would be at a disadvantage. Yin Qianqian. Liang Yunqing tugged at the corner of his shirt worriedly. How could the bear man care so much? He was shouting that he should receive compensation for his injuries, but in fact, he wanted to rob openly. As he spoke, he threw a punch at Yin Qianqian. Liang Yunqing let out a cry of surprise and was pulled behind her by Yin Qianqian. Yin Qianqian did not make much of a move. He tilted his face slightly, and the man's powerful punch brushed past a strand of hair on his forehead and was avoided. His face was still indifferent. He did not even use any of his strength to make such a move. It seemed to prove the disparity in strength. The bear man flew into a rage out of humiliation. His punches were out of order. Yin Qianqian could not be bothered to tangle with him any longer. After flying for more than 10 hours, he went straight to Liang Yunqing's school. He even had an argument with her and went out to buy some food when he was hungry. He could also see Liang Yunqing being robbed in a daze. Yin Qianqian grabbed the bear man's wrist and pulled him behind him. Before he could figure out the situation, he kicked him on the temple with his knee. The bear man fell and did not move again. His movements were fluid and smooth without any pause. He did not fight for hundreds of rounds as Liang Yunqing had expected because Yin Qianqian easily took care of this troublemaker. Let's go. Yin Qianqian walked in front and said to Liang Yunqing who was behind him. Oh. Liang Yunqing followed him and looked at the things in her hands. It was a bread and instant noodles sandwich. And some messy fast food. You were. I was hungry. Why did you suddenly go out to buy it? I was hungry, so I made food for you. In the end, she was still not satisfied with her decision. Actually, I went to learn oil painting, for a reason. Liang Yunqing thought for a long time, but she was too embarrassed to say it. I learned painting because of you. Forget it, I don't mind. Yin Qianqian obviously did not want to continue this topic. Liang Yunqing fell silent. She knew that if she continued to explain, it would only make things worse. She did not tell Yin Qianqian that she had once found a painting in the cupboard at the bottom of the storeroom in her house when she was bored. It was a blue sky with only the sky. It was originally a monotonous painting, but it had deeply attracted her. At first, she thought that the painting, even if it was not a famous ancient painting, would at least be a modern painter with outstanding skills. Little did she know that Hao Cheng had secretly told her that the painting was actually by Yin Qianqian. Liang Yunqing could not help but be surprised because she saw a person yearning for freedom in the painting. However, Hao Cheng had said that this matter must be kept a secret. Yin Qianqian could not know that she had seen this painting. As for why? As usual, Hao Cheng kept his mouth shut. Liang Yunqing was not in a position to probe further, so it became another solid secret on Yin Qianqian. This was a small matter, but it left such a mark in Liang Yunqing's heart. The month she had just arrived at T University, one of the school's venues had been loaned out for an art exhibition. It reminded her of the idea of picking up the brush personally. But when she returned home, Liang Yunqing dared to sit down with Yin Qianqian. No matter how powerful he was not made of iron. There was still a hint of fatigue on his slightly pale face, which made Liang Yunqing feel a slight pain in her heart. Sit down and have a good rest. I'll make you something to eat and take off your clothes. Chapter 67. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 67. R.I.P. Open the shirt author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Sit down and rest well. I'll make you something to eat and take off your clothes. Liang Yunqing did not notice anything wrong when she said this. She finished her sentence smoothly without any stuttering. However, Yin Qianqian's silence made her feel a little embarrassed. Was there something wrong with her way of expressing herself? However, after thinking about it, her words perfectly expressed what she meant. Take off your clothes. Yes. That's right. I need you to do this. She repeated her intention. Yin Qianqian sat on the sofa. He did not move. His chest only trembled slightly and he was still coughing. Did you hurt yourself just now? Take off your clothes and let me take a look. Even though he was trying to hide it coldly, Liang Yunqing could still see that his brows furrowed slightly the moment he raised his hand. She did not know that Yin Qianqian was injured and she did not pay much attention to it. Now that she saw it, she could not ignore it anymore. Didn't you say that you were going to make food? I'm very hungry. Yin Qianqian still did not move. He was just waiting for Liang Yunqing to fulfill what she said just now. If he didn't take off his clothes, she couldn't go up and strip him. It was important to be hungry. She turned around and went to the kitchen to make a bowl of her special pasta. The last time she tasted this flavor was in Country D, also on the table in this house. At that time, Yin Qianqian was still skeptical. What kind of food could this little girl make unexpectedly? She gave him a big surprise. Liang Yunqing quietly watched him eat. This man was sometimes as cold as ice and didn't like to talk. People couldn't understand him. He had his own chauvinistic principles. I know about your injury. Liang Yunqing looked at Yin Qianqian seriously. Don't you have anything to say to me? Yin Qianqian did not answer. He just picked up the porcelain plate and silver fork that he had finished eating and prepared to wash them. It was the same the last time she came. She cooked and he washed the dishes. Yin Qianqian would never forget that she stood in front of him and said in a clear voice, the so-called home should be a division of labor and cooperation. However, this time, she did not want to abide by this rule. You don't need to do this. Let me do it. Liang Yunqing reached out to grab the plate. She used her strength to push Meng, and a big bowl of sauce accidentally spilled on Yin Qianqian's coat. Sorry, I accidentally slipped up. Take off your clothes. I'll help you clean them tomorrow. She looked very innocent, but how could this little trick be hidden from Yin Qianqian? Even so, he still repeatedly let her play tricks under his eyes. Why was it like this? Yin Qianqian had his own explanation. It was like hiding your slippers when you were bored, and you wouldn't bother with it. At worst, you could just knock its little head to wake it up. Perhaps he was the same with Liang Yunqing. In the end, Yin Qianqian took off his coat as she wished. There was a white shirt under it, and bright red blood seeped out of his shoulders and waist. On such a bright shirt, it was even more eye-catching. Blood! Liang Yunqing cried out. She hurriedly took out the medicine box from the room. It's just a little blood. You don't have to be so scared. The wound has a small tear, but the blood doesn't flow fast. Use a gauze to bandage it again and it will heal itself. You may encounter more bleeding than this in the future. You can't be so timid. How can you be so stupid? Liang Yunqing said gloomily. Yes, you are stupid. She was not afraid of the dark red blood because she was timid. She was so nervous because she was worried and distressed. Liang Yunqing didn't say anything. She didn't allow him to say any more nonsense and pulled open his clothes. Chapter 68. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 68. Like a Sweet Hug. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Liang Yunqing did not care about the consequences and directly took off Yin Qianqian's shirt. Yin Qianqian did not refuse. Instead, he sat there calmly, waiting to see what she would do next. After taking off his shirt, Yin Qianqian revealed his perfect inverted triangle figure. It was not as exaggerated as the Europeans in Country D, but it was clear how powerful that layer of muscle was. It was just that his light-toned skin was almost invisible now. There were circles of white bandages around Yin Qianqian's waist, shoulders, and chest. The key point was that the white bandages were still oozing with fresh blood and were slightly moist. It was obviously caused by the large scale movements just now. You clearly know that the wound will tear. Since that person wants money, we'll just give it to him. Anyway, you don't care, or do you have to beat him up to show that you're strong? Liang Yunqing took out the scissors and carefully cut open the bandages on his body. She frowned slightly. That's right, Yin Qianqian replied calmly. Liang Yunqing stopped her movements and stopped. She raised her head to look at Yin Qianqian. She only said that on purpose. She did not expect that Yin Qianqian would admit it so generously. To show your strength to someone you hate and let those who think they are right and want to bully you see how ridiculous he is, that's right. Or do you think that we should bow down to those who are weaker than us and compromise? Liang Yunqing gently removed the bandage and was speechless for a moment. Yin Qianqian could always twist some of her instinctive thoughts. There was nothing wrong with thinking in such a reverse direction. The wound was indeed not big. Fortunately, it did not need to be re-stitched. However, the originally healed ferocious wound still stung Liang Yunqing's eyes. But at least, you have to ensure that you are not injured. Liang Yunqing blinked her eyes hard to hide her slightly hot eyes. A small wound and seeing you being bullied. What do you think I should choose? Yin Qianqian's words did not sound very emotional, but this sentence made Liang Yunqing's heart beat even more strongly in her chest. She also felt inexplicably nervous. At this time, Liang Yunqing was helping Yin Qianqian bandage his wound again. The bandage went around his waist, and her two hands took the bandage from his back. She leaned forward slightly, and the two of them were very close to each other, like a sweet and ambiguous hug. Liang Yunqing used an unprofessional way to bandage all the wounds on Yin Qianqian's body. Fortunately, Ling Ruofei had taught her some basic knowledge when she was injured. Although it did not look good, at least it was very comfortable. Even though Yin Qianqian was picky, he was willing to give her a passing grade this time. Can you tell me, why you are injured? She did not want to interfere, nor was she curious to find out some secrets about the evil young master. She just wanted to know about him. Yin family. Yin Qianqian did not show any embarrassment, nor did he hide the fact that he thought Liang Yunqing was overstepping her boundaries. It was as if they were talking about a common matter. Do you want to know more? This was the first time he had mentioned himself and his family. Liang Yunqing nodded her head heavily. Her heart seemed to be burning with an inexplicable flame, just for the sake of revealing the cold man's heart in front of her and knowing more about him. Chapter 69. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 69. If you and I are willing. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Yin Qianqian lowered his head and leaned close to Liang Yunqing's face. He did not wear the bloody shirt anymore. When he lowered his head, he could see the beautiful lines of his neck. Then, his Adam's apple slid up and down as he spoke, following the line of his Adam's apple. Then, he could see the protruding collarbone. It's considered an upgraded version of the family fight. Yin Qianqian said in a low voice. There was a rare hint of a smile in his words, but it was a mocking tone. A real fight is much more terrifying than the ones in movies and novels. Yin Qianqian suddenly coughed a few more times and pointed at his own wound. These are all physical. At most, I'll die, but these are not the things that are more painful. Liang Yunqing was stunned. She remembered that when Yin Qianqian had dealt with Zhao Xuexiang, he had told her that the best punishment for the enemy was not physically, but mentally. Could it be? He had also experienced such a thing. Liang Yunqing did not dare to continue thinking about it. Don't be afraid. As if seeing the slight fear in Liang Yunqing's mind, Yin Qianqian's big hand landed on her head and gently rubbed it as if to comfort her. You just need to be yourself as you were in the past. You need to become stronger and be able to protect yourself. Other than becoming stronger yourself, can I help you after I become better? Liang Yunqing's pair of bright black eyes shone with a dazzling brilliance. Even Yin Qianqian was somewhat enlightened. The girl in front of him had changed. Not only did her appearance become more beautiful, but her entire person's expression was also completely different from the past. Of course, he would not forget Liang Yunqing when they first met. Her entire body was drenched from the rain. She was really like a wet little sparrow that fell to the ground and trembled. Now, the little sparrow actually said such a thing. It sounded funny, but it was also irresistible. This kind of Liang Yunqing actually made people unable to take their eyes off her. Maybe. Yin Qianqian did not say anything to discourage Liang Yunqing, even though he did not think that such a weak, slender, and cute girl could help her, even after the evolution. Probably not much. But Liang Yunqing was really inspired by these words. She suddenly found another goal in her life. In addition to making everyone re-evaluate her, she could also prevent Yin Qianqian from such a disaster. To prove that she was not a useless and weak person, she also needed to prove to Yin Qianqian that she could do it. With a little selfishness, Liang Yunqing had a fantasy wish, which was to stand shoulder to shoulder with Yin Qianqian. If one person was willing to work hard for another person, what did that mean? Liang Yunqing still could not figure out one, two, or three of them before her feelings were aroused. She only knew that she had such a firm wish. A good night's sleep belonged to two people. That day, Liang Yunqing did not have any classes in the morning, so she slept soundly. After she got up, she walked out of her room and went downstairs. After a few months of life, she had long become familiar with this room. She rubbed her eyes, probably forgetting that Yin Qianqian was also there. She was wearing comfortable and soft silk pajamas, and the suspenders on her shoulders slipped down her bare feet, exposed her two snow-white thighs, and she was suddenly exposed. She blinked her eyes and met Yin Qianqian's gaze. Liang Yunqing came to her senses and went back to her room with a slight blush. She changed into the bare pajamas with shorts, and she returned from sexy to cute. At this time, Yin Qianqian was standing in front of the window that he always liked to stand at. He was talking to someone on the phone. The plane will be back in 3 hours. Liang Yunqing was completely awake. Didn't she just come yesterday? Why was she leaving so soon? Chapter 70. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 70. You like that gigolo author? Bitter Days. Machine translation. Yin Qianqian hung up the phone and turned around. You're leaving so soon? Liang Yunqing asked with a disappointed expression. It took about 2 hours to get to the airport from here. The 3-hour flight meant that they only had 1 hour to spend together. It was just one breakfast. I've made all the arrangements. Things like last night won't happen again. I came here to see that you're okay, Yin Qianqian said as he walked in front of Liang Yunqing. Liang Yunqing's heart skipped a beat, and she had a bad feeling. What exactly happened? Why would Yin Qianqian, who always had everything under control, come to see her just to ensure her safety? Is the situation in the country bad? Although Yin Qianqian told her who launched the sneak attack, he did not tell her the reason. And how bad was it? It's not as bad as you think. Yin Qianqian looked relaxed as if it was not a big deal. It was true that Liang Yunqing cared about him, but she was afraid that she would make a mountain out of a molehill. Every time, she would panic and think that something bad was going to happen. In the end, Yin Qianqian would settle the matter with a flick of his finger. Therefore, she decided to remain silent and not ask any further questions. The two of them quietly finished their breakfast together. Yin Qianqian was ready to leave. If there's anything, contact Hao Cheng. This was the last sentence that Yin Qianqian said to her before he left. To be honest, Liang Yunqing was a little disappointed because he said, if there's anything, contact Hao Cheng. Why couldn't it be, if there's anything, contact me? However, Mr. Yin was busy with work and had a lot of things to attend to. It was only right that he was afraid of being disturbed. Although Liang Yunqing was a little dissatisfied, she felt that she had no position, so she turned around and forgot about this matter. 3 months later, it was Liang Yunqing's 17th birthday. In the past 16 birthdays, in addition to her childhood, her adoptive parents would buy her a small cake to cheer her up. No one knew when it started. Even she herself had forgotten that she had a birthday. Initially, Liang Yunqing did not care about this matter at all. However, Chris, the senior who had stopped them that day, had seen her application form and had a very comprehensive grasp of her information. He gathered a group of classmates who had a good relationship with her and decided to hold a birthday party. One should never hit a smiling person. Although Liang Yunqing was embarrassed to socialize, how could the kindness of others tarnish her face? It was just a trial given to her by Yin Qianqian. In fact, it was nothing. Now, Liang Yunqing had already been able to make small talk with others. The first difficult problem that Yin Qianqian had given her was to bring her to a birthday party. She had never thought that her birthday would come one day in such a foreign country and play with a group of classmates with different hair and skin colors. Liang. Chris took the gift and came to Liang Yunqing's side. His meaning was obvious. He had confessed to her more than once. This time, he was unusually serious. What Liang Yunsheng gave him was naturally an apology. Next week, I will participate in the graduation exam with the graduates. After I pass, I will return to Country Z. If you are willing, I can also go to Country Z to work with you. Chris obviously knew that she was going to return to Country Z, so he decided to make the last big effort. Liang Yunsheng looked troubled and shook her head. The Easterners were still reserved, and Chris also understood that this was the meaning of her firm rejection. You have someone you like, it's the man from last time. Chris looked unwilling. In the words of you Chinese, he's just a gigolo, you all like that kind of face, it's very good. Looking. The strange three Chinese words, she did not know where Chris learned them. Liang Yunsheng could not help but chuckle, she did not admit or deny it. If she could make Chris give up completely, then it would not be bad to make him think so. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Liang Yunsheng lowered her head and looked at the name on the screen. First, she was a little surprised, then she pursed her lips slightly.